Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Finding Local Producers and Ensuring Farm Food Safety Practices. This webinar is being presented through Project PA, a collaboration between the Pennsylvania Department of Education, Division of Food and Nutrition, and Penn State University. I'm Elaine McDonald, Director of Project PA, and I will be moderating today's webinar. Before we begin the presentations, just a few pieces of housekeeping. We have two presentations today, and we'll be taking questions following the presentations. At any time during the webinar, you can type your questions into the chat box, and we will collect them and save them until the end. The chat box is on the right-hand side of your screen. In the file share box in the lower left-hand side of the screen, you'll find the slides in handout format available for you to download. And at the end of the webinar, you will also find in that file share box a continuing education certificate. We are recording today's webinar and we'll be posting the audio from the webinar along with the presentation slides on the Project PA website. So speaking of recorded webinars, before we get into today's presentations, I just wanted to review and remind you that this is our sixth in a series of 6 Farm to School webinars that we've conducted over about the past year. And the rebroadcasts of these webinars are available on the Project PA website to view if you'd like to. We did a webinar a little over a year ago on farm to early care and education. There's also a webinar on National Farm to School Month, celebrating your success. Just a reminder, October is National Farm to School Month, so if you want to start thinking about some ideas that you might want to do next school year in October for National Farm to School Month, that webinar might spark some ideas. There's a webinar on procuring local foods in child nutrition programs, so that webinar reviews the federal and state requirements for procurement in general, but then specifically how to procure local foods within those requirements. A webinar on growing your school garden that goes over the basics, or an overview of school garden along with some examples from 2 districts in Pennsylvania. And then finally, Farm to Summer, incorporating local foods and providing garden experiences in summer food service programs. So if you happen to operate a summer food service program, that's an ideal time to think about incorporating the agricultural abundance that we have in Pennsylvania in the summer. And again, today's webinar will be added to those webinars and will be on the Project PA website. So for today's webinar, we're pleased to have joining us today 2 presenters. First, we'll hear from Ashley Dugan, who is the PA Preferred Coordinator from the Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture. And Ashley will be talking about finding local producers. And then we will have Tegan Bernstein, Senior Program Specialist from the Office of Community Food Systems at USDA FNS Mid-Atlantic Region. And Tegan is also our Farm to School lead for the Mid-Atlantic region. And Tegan will be addressing the farm food safety aspect of today's webinar. So I will pull up Ashley's presentation. And I'll turn it over to Ashley to begin.
Good morning. Give me one moment, please. I am just trying to pull up my notes here. Okay, now I can see everything. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to participate on this call today. I thought I would begin by giving an overview of the PA Preferred program. PA Preferred is the Commonwealth statewide branding program for agricultural producers, products, and businesses. PA Preferred has over 2,300 members, and the brand has gained momentum over the past 5 years, and we're proud that many consumers recognize the brand and understand what it means. When you see the PA Preferred logo on a product, you can be sure that the ingredients in that product were grown and produced in Pennsylvania. And that's right, I like to reiterate, grown and processed in Pennsylvania. So that's a lot of power for one little logo, and here's how it works. The PA Preferred program supports local communities and connects consumers with local products. This in turn strengthens the local economy and promotes local job creation. Also, the support and increased business for local farmers helps to preserve farmland for future generations. Pennsylvania is home to 7.7 million acres of land and farms, with the average farm size of 133 acres. The Commonwealth boasts 57,900 farms, 97% of which are family-owned. There are over 200,000 jobs in the agricultural and food industry in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania leads the way in production of many items. PA produces 594 million pounds of agaricus mushrooms, and those are the mushrooms that I call button mushrooms, kind of the standard ones that everyone's probably very familiar with. So PA comes in first in the nation for mushroom production. We are churning and producing 93.8 million pounds of butter, and I think I feel the same way about butter that many people feel about bacon. There can never be too much, so we're really lucky that PA is second in butter production. Some busy chickens. PA is fourth in eggs. 8 billion eggs were produced last year alone. So good news for cider and winemakers. We are fourth in apples and grapes. An astounding 493 million pounds of apples and 910,000 tons of grapes are produced annually in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania is fifth in the nation for milk production, producing 10 billion pounds annually. I mention all of these commodities because it is important to remember that Pennsylvania is one of the most productive farming states in the nation. Today I'll be sharing some ideas for how you, as food service directors, might successfully procure more local ingredients for your schools. I'll talk about how you can educate yourself on seasonal availability, take advantage of online resources, consider other distribution models, and network and use community involvement to help your efforts. So educate yourself on seasonal availability. The first thing I recommend is to become very familiar with the growing cycle of Pennsylvania, specifically seasonal considerations in your specific region. PA Preferred has a document that highlights some popular items, and it specifies when one can expect to find those items in PA. In order to really dial this list in, you might consider doing some further research into your region's specialties and special circumstances. For instance, Adams County is a spectacular area for tree fruit. Erie specializes in wine grapes. It's a large state. Weather and environmental diversity will very likely play a role in determining how accurate this list is for your given area. Penn State Extension offices can be very helpful when it comes to learning these nuances of seasonality. So we recommend reaching out to them whenever you have any questions. And PA Preferred has our seasonal calendar available. This is just a small snapshot of the top of it, but we have it available as handouts, and I'd be happy to send them to anyone who's interested. PA Preferred members become part of a well-connected network of businesses. We help connect manufacturers of processed products with distributors, retailers, chefs, and food service professionals. The PA Preferred website is equipped with a searchable map that allows consumers and others to search for specific commodities in any given region, specifically by zip code. In this example, you will see that I searched for all of the blueberry producers within my home zip code. A list of retailers that sell local blueberries, as well as farms and farmers markets, have had blueberries show up in that right-hand column. Excuse me. We look forward to soon launching our revised PA Preferred website, which will include a new and improved search function, compelling photos and graphics, recipe ideas, and much more, all designed to better connect consumers and businesses with PA Preferred products. And just a friendly warning, our current website and search function oftentimes causes some headaches for users, and headaches for myself. If you are ever attempting to find information but have issues, feel free to contact me directly, and I'll happily assist you by searching our database through the back end of our resources and pull a specialized list just for you and your school or district. Word of mouth is oftentimes a good way to procure the specific items you need. We recommend visiting your local farmers markets and other local food-focused events in your community. Once you find some local farm connections, I predict that doors will open and opportunities to learn about other producers will appear. The farming community is a tight-knit group, and my experience has been that there is often a spirit of collectivity. One farmer you are working with will likely have recommendations about who you could contact for your other needs. So consider all of your options through all of this. Sometimes our efforts to source directly from the farmer proves to be a logistical nightmare. And please note that this section is not meant to discourage you from working directly with farmers, but its purpose is to shed some light on other models that are often helpful when sourcing for sizable operations like your schools and other institutions. And these models, when done correctly, still offer a good service to farmers and offer them a fair price for their products. So distributors and other groups. PA Preferred is proud to have multiple distributor members that are taking on a local sourcing mission within their companies. Paragon Foods and Kegels and others have developed ways to increase the amount of local products available to their customers. There are pros and cons to working with a distributor. The pros include the ability to have the food delivered directly to your loading dock. Oftentimes, small farms are not able to deliver and require that you would pick up your own orders. And that type of situation is often very time-consuming and requires the purchase of a vehicle or possibly hiring a driver. But when you work with a distributor, they are tasked with working with the farmers and getting all of the product into their warehouse for storage. Working with a distributor also cuts out some steps in terms of ordering. Rather than ordering your product piecemeal, you would order everything from one provider. Distributors are all different from one another, and some are better than others when it comes to labeling items with origin information. If you take this route, it will be important to ask questions of the distributor in advance to ensure that you will be given the information you need about the products coming your way. When you make large orders, you'll likely be receiving items from multiple farms. I wanted to mention there's a nonprofit regional food distributor out of Philadelphia called the Common Market. They function similarly to a traditional distributor, but have exclusive links to local farms and do not deal with any imported items. Cooperatives and food hubs in your community might also serve as feasible options. In addition to PA Preferred and the resources available from the PA Department of Agriculture, you will find that there are a number of nonprofit and community groups that are working hard to ensure that Pennsylvania farmers can find fair outlets for the products that they produce. PASA, the Pennsylvania Association for Sustainable Agriculture, Buy Fresh, Buy Local, and the Pennsylvania Vegetable Marketing Board are all options for you as you explore what local food sourcing options might be a best fit for your school or district. And you're in good company. PA Preferred continues to offer workshops and networking opportunities to our wholesale members. I thought I'd mention this today because it might prove to be encouraging to you that farms are actively seeking ways to get their products into institutions, including schools like yours. Remember to use PA Preferred as a resource. We are more than happy to try to get the appropriate information into your hands. And I'd encourage you to do your due diligence in learning about the ways that the food system works and then decide how your school or district can link in most successfully. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you all this morning. My contact information is listed here. Best luck to you all. Thank you for your interest in supporting Pennsylvania farms and for the work that you are doing to get healthy, locally sourced food into the schools of Pennsylvania. As an advocate for local food and as a new mom, I thank you.
Thank you, Ashley. That was terrific. And we're all smiling at this final slide of yours.
I hope you don't mind my shameless little plug of my daughter.
I don't think anyone.
I think she makes people smile.
I don't think anyone minds your shameless plug. And again, I want to welcome our participants. If you have any questions, to include them in the chat box. And I'm going to open Tegan's presentation. And turn it over to Tegan.
Great. Thank you, Elaine. Ashley, that's a very difficult act to follow with your adorable baby on that last slide, and congratulations. I also wanted to note the new PA Preferred website looks fantastic. Thank you for sharing that. So, as Elaine mentioned, I'm Tegan Bernstein, and I am the Regional Farm to School Lead for the Office of Community Food Systems. I cover the Mid-Atlantic region, Pennsylvania being one of them, and I also live in Pennsylvania, born and raised here. So delighted to be presenting for all of you today. I just want to have a short disclaimer in that this is a relatively brief webinar, so not really going to have time to get into all of the details of everything you're going to need to know about food safety, but hopefully we will be able to go over some highlights. So ideally, you'll leave today understanding what the USDA's requirements are in terms of food safety and learn some basic on-farm best practices and food safety considerations. And then I actually am hoping to have a little bit of a conversation about food safety and liability. So just briefly, before I get into food safety, in case those of you on the line are not familiar with the USDA's Farm to School program, the USDA officially got involved in Farm to School in 2010 with the passage of the reauthorization of the Richard B. Russell National School Lunch Act, and essentially our Farm to School program was created there. And we were noted by Congress to do three things. I've highlighted two of them here. The first one was to create a grant program. I hope all of you know about our Farm to School grant program. The new RFA will be coming out in September. This is a shameless plug, and we hope that everyone on this call, schools and school districts, consider applying for a USDA Farm to School grant. And then the second thing we were tasked to do, which was to provide technical assistance and training, and that's how our team was created. So I just also want to note that's really what I'm here for. And if you have any questions, you have a wonderful contact at the Department of Education as well as the Department of Agriculture, and you're always welcome to reach out to them or directly out to me as well. So I'm really here to serve as that resource for the region. The third thing was to create the Farm to School census, essentially. And because I wasn't sure of everyone's familiarity with Farm to School and the USDA, I did want to note that there isn't a prescribed program at the USDA. I know it's very unlike us, as we like to do have prescriptive programs and policies, but the idea is that we consider a complete Farm to School program any program that combines nutrition and agriculture education or food education with serving local foods in a school meal. That could be breakfast, lunch, summer meals. So those two activities combined consist of a Farm to School program, according to the USDA. Okay, onward. So this is just some quotes of little questions that I get frequently. I think there still is a perception that the USDA has some level of regulation around buying directly from farmers, or some people think that, all of those farmers need to be GAP certified and they can't find any. And I just wanted to share that that is not really true at all. We don't have any rules prohibiting local farm produce being served in the cafeterias, buying directly from a farmer. In fact, our team was created to try to provide that training and technical assistance to help facilitate those connections. And the USDA does not determine food safety standards for vendors. Schools and school districts, and depending upon the state and county, are the ones who determine their own food safety vendors. We also do not require GAP certification. I think that is a little bit of a confusing message out there. Our sister agency, the Agricultural Marketing Service, is in charge of making sure that there is a way for farms to receive GAP certification, but we do not require GAP certification to serve local products and any products in any school lunch programs. And I just wanted to note, too, I'm not sure how familiar everyone on the call is with GAP certification, but it's not they're best practices. So it's really just a guide to ensure that farmers have best practices, and the certification that happens can happen through local agencies. It's not always a USDA employee. In fact, that's more rare, going out to the farm. So it's very different than like a USDA meat processing plant, where there are FDA inspectors and USDA inspectors, depending upon the situation, going out to make sure that things are certified. For fruit and vegetable farms, they're really best practices, and GAP certification can be a right thing for a farm, but it also can not be viable for some farms, and there are a few reasons. And there are other ways to ensure that there are safe practices going on that farm. I also want to note that there's nothing inherently more risky about local products. It's not more dangerous, for example, to buy directly from a farmer than it is with a distributor. And I would argue that it is actually easier to ensure food safety standards as you know exactly where that product is coming from. And we know that when there are outbreaks with food, it tends to be more challenging to follow that line. So a benefit you have is a shorter supply chain. Okay, so essentially these are, when this says risk areas, these are really considerations, and these are taken straight from GAPs, and I should have explained what GAP stands for. I shouldn't assume it. They stand for Good Agricultural Practices, so that's what GAPs means. And essentially, you want to, and again, these are sort of the standards, you want to ask about soil, water source, growing practices, harvesting practices, if they train any of their staff on appropriate handling, and things like basic sanitation, aka hand washing, how those products are stored, and then how they're delivered, right? And so these are the basic good agricultural practices that can be applied whether or not a farm has a GAP certification or not. And of course, we always have our disclaimer that I'm speaking from a federal perspective, and I don't think this is true in Pennsylvania, but in some other states, there are other regulations that you might need to consider, but I don't believe that that's true in Pennsylvania. On the state level, it might be on the local level, so we always want you to check with your local health department or Department of Agriculture. All right, so here are some best practices. So essentially, you would ideally want, you ideally would want a farm to have a food safety plan. Also, especially if they're getting their water from, most farms are, from, groundwater or ponds, you would want to have a water test. And a lot of farms do test their water annually for other reasons, and there's a few things that you're looking there. Product liability insurance, and we'll get into that a little bit later. And this is, again, something that's not required by the USDA, and it might not be feasible at all, but you should see if the farm is open for a site visit, if that's something that you're interested in doing and can work out. And then also, and this is just really in starting any farm-to-school program, when you're starting that conversation, make your food safety desires known. Let the farmers know. They might not know what you are concerned about. So ask those questions. If it is transportation and you want to know about the boxes that things are stored in? Are they disposable or are they sanitized? Ask those things. It's a really good thing to put up front, and it's often something that farmers, if they're interested in selling to you, ideally it can be something that can help them get up to speed. And then just a little note down here and this Ashley mentioned this too, but sometimes if you are buying not directly from a farm but through a distributor, you can ask these questions of the distributor and let them, start those conversations. And these are actually things, if you are working with a distributor, we encourage you to ask as well, just to have a little bit more knowledge and transparency about where those products are coming from. If this also feels overwhelming, you have a wonderful Department of Agriculture there and also a wonderful cooperative extension program throughout the state. And these are also conversations that those local agents can assist you with as well. Okay. So I just wanted to put this slide up here because when I generally get food safety questions, I find that I'm not really being asked about food safety. Not that I don't think plenty of people have valid food safety questions. When we actually get to kind of the meat of the matter, it tends to be more about liability. And I just wanted to break those two things out and note that they're different. And you cannot really conflate them, right? So when I hear food safety concerns, what comes out is really liability concerns, not necessarily food safety concerns. And so I just would hope that throughout this webinar, you could work to separate those two things in your mind. And note, too, that all farmers who sell their products have some type of liability insurance. It might not be the liability insurance that you are looking for, but they do have liability insurance. For example, farmers markets require liability insurance. Most distributors require some level of liability insurance. And what's a normal amount of liability insurance? If you're working with a small farm and you're working with them directly, somewhere between $1 million, I find for farm-to-school programs, even with a medium to large-size district, that's generally adequate. But again, this is normally determined at the district level. So it is something that your school board or your principal or your superintendent probably has an idea of what they require their other vendors to carry. And I bring this up because this really isn't a one-size-fits-all scenario. And you really could be not providing the most competitive market that you could, meaning allowing more farmers to bid, if your liability insurance amount is too high. And it's worth having a conversation about risk versus the amount of liability insurance. Meaning, when a district has a high number, let's say more like 5 million, and I've even heard numbers higher than that or above, that's really going to preclude some small farmers because it's going to be too expensive for them. Does that mean that their food is any less safe? Absolutely not. And that high number might be there because there are higher risks when you're working directly with a distributor as they're congregating products from a wide variety of sources and you have less transparency. So I encourage you to have this conversation if liability in your district comes up and the number is high, like closer to that 5, and just ask them to kind of talk through that with you a little bit because you do want that insurance requirement to be in line with the risk there and not out of line with that. Okay, so here are just some questions that I wanted to throw up here about how to start the conversation. This is not an inclusive list, but I think the first question, and again, if you are putting out a request for information or an RFP, and I'll have an example of that later in the presentation, a great first question to ask is, do you have a written food safety plan or an SOP, a standard operating procedure? And they might say, yes, we do, it's right here, and that might be great. Or they might say no, and that, again, that doesn't mean that their food is unsafe. You can just ask them the follow-up question of how do you document and ensure food safety? And they might say, oh, well, we have this chart, or this is what I do. So really, just like everything with Farm to School, this is about starting that conversation. Something again, and I have another chart later that explains why I put these questions up there, but you do want to have an awareness if produce will be rinsed or washed on the farm and what kind of water is being used for that. And that might help determine whether or not you want it to be rinsed or washed there. You also, I think, asking about water is a very basic and general and appropriate question. You can note and ask to see their most recent water test, or just ask if they do, right? You don't need to become a on-farm food safety expert. You can ask them to provide that information. And then also, of course, delivery. You do want to make sure that things are being delivered to you in the manner that you are used to, and want to ensure that things are delivered at an appropriate temperature. And again, if you're buying directly from farmers who might be not used to selling to schools, I think that this is a really good place to start in terms of conversation. Okay, so here's a little decision tree. I think I got this chart a while ago, but essentially this is a checklist to prioritize practices. So we know at the USDA the large majority of foodborne illness and outbreaks comes from storage and handling. And just like you have a HACCP plan in your kitchen, you want to ensure that there's something on the farm. And so this is really a prioritization here, right? So you essentially want to know about the workers. You essentially want to know, do the workers receive food safety training? Do they have an adequate place to wash their hands? Do they have an adequate place to go to the bathroom? Again, because we know this is where food safety risks come from. Essentially, it is contamination from either a human being sick or there being, this is generally, I'm talking about more of the large-scale foodborne outbreaks from a large animal farm being close by to the produce farm. But I do think that, when you are talking about this, starting with this worker checklist and making sure that they have appropriate, and essentially what these are appropriate labor practices, right? So yes, it's important for food safety, but if there's not a place for workers to go to the bathroom and there's not a place for workers to wash their hands and have access to clean water, that would be concerning to you anyway, hopefully, because you would be a little concerned that those workers are being treated appropriately. Okay, and this is more of a checklist that you could use if you decided to do a farm visit, a farm site visit. You also could email this or send this to a farmer that you were thinking of purchasing from and have them fill it out and send it back to you. It's also a great way of letting farmers know what you are looking for. Again, I think some of these things probably most farmers are doing, and some of them they maybe haven't thought of, and being able to put that down in a written form can be really helpful. And I'll note where these are taken from on our last slide, on the resources slide. Okay, so I see that there's a question from Yvonne Grove, and I think hopefully this slide will help to explain that. So this is taken from a Minneapolis public school RFP, where they have a section essentially about food safety. So if you are putting something out that's a formal procurement, you absolutely can, and we definitely encourage it, have a section asking about food safety considerations. So you can see here it's relatively simple. All of you are allowed to use this information. Minneapolis requires product liability insurance of $1 million. It asks about the water test. It asks about a draft food safety plan. And again, because Minneapolis is willing to work with their farmers, they don't require it. It's something that then the district will work to make sure that the farms have implemented before they start buying. And they also just ask if they have third-party approved GAP audit. And note, it's not saying certification, it's saying an audit, because also those two things are different, and you should know that there can be a significant period of time between the initial audit and then having the certification. So this is just to say, as our food is grown in the soil and in open air, no audit will ever remove all food safety risk. No certification will ever remove food safety risk. It's part of living in a biodynamic world, but these are things that we can do to limit it as well, to limit that risk. And I just want to follow that up with a note on soil and I'm not sure if this is a question anyone has here. I have these two pictures of lettuce, and obviously the head on the right is rotten lettuce, and the leaf on the left has some soil on it. And it might not be something that your kitchen is willing to accept, but the fact that there might be soil, and I don't use the term dirt because dirt is what happens underneath your fingernails or you wash off of your hands, and soil is a vital living force that we are grateful grows most of the food that it provides our existence. So soil does not make something unclean or unfood safe intrinsically. Essentially, animal and human illness and waste does, and that is not soil. Soil has, help when a soil is properly maintained. It has health beneficial properties to it. So it's not necessarily that you should reject something in your kitchen just because it has soil on it, especially if you decide you don't want that produce fully washed in the field. You'd rather take care of it in the kitchen where you have your HACCP plan in place. You know that your workers then can clean it and you're not doing any double cleaning. I've seen some districts who decide it works better for them to clean things in their kitchen because they feel more comfortable doing that. And most of their produce, in their HACCP plan, they say they have to wash it anyway, and you're not wasting extra water because it wasn't fully rinsed in the first place. So I'll just say it one more time. Soil in and of itself does not make food unfood safe, and you shouldn't reject food coming into your kitchen just because it has soil on it. If it's rotten, definitely. Okay, so here's our final little wrap-up slide. Just wanted to note that if you go to our USDA Farm to School website, you will find links to all of those good agricultural practices, as well as other food safety links, just that are broader for all school food, not necessarily related to just local food, because essentially these are standards that should apply to all food coming into your cafeteria. Again, there's nothing intrinsically more food unsafe about local food. You have that greater transparency, which gives you greater opportunity. We also have a 12-part webinar series, and we have a Farm to School toolkit if you're just getting started. The little girl eating the apple on the right is on the cover of our procurement guide, Procuring Local Foods for Child Nutrition Programs. I know Elaine and Audrey have done some great trainings in your state recently about that, and it is available for full download on our website. Those two charts that I shared and some of the questions were taken from the Minneapolis Farm to School Toolkit as well as the Colorado Farm to School Task Force. So they didn't have links that were very easy to find, so I think it makes the most sense if you would Google those two and then search inside of the documents. They were PDFs, and I could not link directly to them. So, and I also wanted to note, if you're just interested in general about GAPS, Cornell has a few great resources as well. Cornell Cooperative Extension, really on the ag side, but they've developed some really easy to understand flowcharts about each of those food safety, on-farm food safety considerations that I listed in a slide that's earlier. So you can kind of see questions and answers there in a logic model that allows you to know if you are going to be asking those questions, what are sort of appropriate answers. They have them all listed there. So I'd also recommend that. And thank you very much for your time. I'm happy to answer any further questions. This is my email. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'll turn it back to you, Elaine.
Thanks, Tegan. Excellent presentation. Lots of useful information. Again, if anyone has questions, please use the chat box. I think Tegan addressed Avon Grove's question. If any others have questions, again, please just type it into the chat box. We'll give you a few minutes to see if anyone comes up with a question. In the meantime, I want to remind you that the certificate is now available to download from the file share box in the lower left-hand side of the screen, and that is a certificate that documents your professional development credits for this webinar. I don't see...
Elaine,
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is Ashley. I thought I would offer a few thoughts to the question that is on the screen about considerations when making a bid doc or an RFQ. Kind of in addition to what Tegan had mentioned, I would suggest adding your expectation for the distributor or farmer to label and be willing to be transparent about the origin of the items. Like I mentioned in my presentation, sometimes it's hard to get that information.
The specifications that Ashley mentioned, actually every one that she mentioned we have in there. So if you're looking for specific language, that is all available in the Procuring Local Foods for Child Nutrition program.
Awesome, thank you, and that's really useful to me. I'll look into that as well. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks you both of you. And also I just wanted to put a plug in for our local procurement webinar that we did earlier this year, I guess, and that is available on the Project PA website that gives suggestions for language to target local products in your RFPs or bid specifications or even in your informal procurement procedures.
Wonderful.
It doesn't look to me like we have any further questions. I guess you all did such a wonderful job at addressing these two issues. So again, I want to thank Ashley and Tegan for joining us today, and I want to thank all of our participants as well for joining us for the webinar. And have a good day.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.